because I realized like that's the old story that I didn't know I was writing. And now that I know that I'm the creator of my experience, I have to intentionally be doing these things and grab a hold of that, or else I'm going to be a slave to the outside world the rest of my life. What's up, everyone? This is Sean Graves on Your Superior Self.
Sean, my brother, I just want to take a moment and thank you for taking the time to join me on this platform and just share your story of freedom, right, with my audience and all that entails. And so, thank you, brother, for taking the time.
Yeah, man, it's awesome to be here. Super grateful for you and grateful to have this space today. And I'm excited to see what wants to come through.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, I was listening to an episode that you've done earlier, and it's so fascinating because you used the term matrix. You escaped the matrix, and yeah, I could not resonate with that more than I do right now. Just seeing the reality that we live in, and the model of just what society is currently, and how I contribute to that. I consider a matrix, and just the stories and programs that we run and grow up with. But your process wasn't like a clean cut from that. It wasn't like, all right, I'm leaving the matrix, here I go. And it was, happily ever after. It was a process. It was like very strenuous, and it was a hard road to walk. Can you give some listeners and watchers right now just some context about your journey? And when you say the matrix, what do you mean, and how did you escape that?
Yeah, man. Oh, great opening question. I feel like the matrix is a term that's used a lot these days. That's something I see everywhere now. And to me, it's taken on a couple of different meanings as time has gone on from 7, 8 years ago, when I really started that process. But um, yeah, I was in a corporate sales career in technology, and there is I've always been a pretty spiritual guy. I've always been asking myself the deep questions. I've always wondered about the nature of reality. I've always wondered about God and the universe and what that was. And I remember when I was like 22 or 23, just out of college, I was always asking the question, like, what is this? Why are we here? What's the point of this? And that was also during a very deep depression. And I remembered I did this 7-day survival kind of workshop out in the woods with this guy, Tom Brown. And it was such a seemingly random moment where I was walking through the woods, and all of a sudden I felt like my entire reality collapsed. And mainly my religious context, what I thought God was, this man in the sky with a beard who was judging, you go to heaven, you go to hell. All of that just collapsed, and I was left in this place of like, I don't even know what's real anymore. The only thing that I could sense was real was the nature that I was in. And that started to kind of catapult me on this journey. And then 3 years later, I was listening to a podcast with Aubrey Marcus and Joe Rogan, and something about that, something inside of me was like, listen to every word that's being spoken here. And I've never been more present. And by the end of that podcast, I had signed up for a retreat in the Amazon with Blue Morpho, doing ayahuasca journeys.
Hmm.
And I emptied out all the money I had in my bank account for the flight, for the retreat. And it was almost like I was in a hypnotic state. And when I popped out of it, I was like, what the hell did I just do? But I knew that was like one of the first, deeper knowing experiences of my life. And at that time also, yeah, I had been looking around at things, and I was looking at the people I was hanging out with and what I was doing every weekend, and the job I was showing up to every day, and the commute of being squished on this train with a bunch of unhappy people, and just being like, is this what it's gonna be the rest of the way? And so I went to the Amazon, whole story on that. I'll get into maybe another time, but that popped everything open. And I came back from that, and I started to see, it was kind of like that moment in the Matrix movie when Neo unplugs and he realizes that he's a battery in this like big machine. And that can be scary, confusing, depressing, because you don't really know what's going on. And then you're in this place of like, I don't know who I am. And when you go from a solid place of thinking you know who you are, and you're attached to that ego, that persona that you've built up like a character your entire life, and then you realize it's all bullshit, that's a very vulnerable place to be in, which is where a lot of people find themselves today. And we've seen a lot of this, especially since the whole COVID experience. So that happened. And then I just remember going back to work after the Amazon, looking at my computer into a black screen as it was rebooting. And I saw a reflection of myself, and I was like, what the fuck am I doing here? This life has nothing to do with me. And then I realized like the reality that I took on and being in this job and everything I was doing, it was the model that I got from my dad. I saw him doing that. I thought that's what it was. Society's telling me that. I'm seeing my other friends do it. And I'm like, this has zero to do with who I am and why I'm here and what I want to do on this planet, what I want to explore. And so very, very quickly after that, I don't know, maybe like 5-6 months, I sold everything. And I left the East Coast. I grew up in Boston and went to California, across the country, and just to start over. And I just had this trust of like, whatever happens from there, the gaps will fill in. And bright-eyed, bushy-tailed young guy going to the West Coast, have a little money saved up, and within 4 months, I was broke. I was homeless, living out of my car, and questioning everything, and just like in this place of like, what did I do? Did I maybe I should go back. Maybe I should seek safety again, because all I wanted was safety when that instability was going on. And so that was kind of the unplug from the matrix moment.
Mm. So beautiful, man. Yeah. Well, to your Amazon story, what was it that you realized that you were, right? Because I know everyone watching this right now is going to ask that question. Like, if you figured out like that the persona is not you, then who are you?
Yeah. Well, you can't really define that, it's your when you realize your true nature, as the observer, as the I am awareness, the story of who you were. I mean, I just think of the river analogy, right? It's always flowing. It's never fixed. And when you're attached to that false persona that you really created from a place of trying to cope with crazy shit in the world, crazy, emotional, intense things that you felt as a little boy or a little girl, your ego persona is just built around trying to keep you safe and trying to handle these things that you had no idea how to handle. That, for a lot of us, our parents didn't really get that either. And so we were just replaying the same things that they got. And when that cracks open and you realize like you're really no place, no thing, nowhere, and no time, it's unsettling at first, but then it's amazing because you realize you're just the creator every day of your experience, and you get to be what you choose to be. And there's no definition around it. You might have certain tendencies, cool, like unique aspects of yourself, like archetypes within you that express uniquely to you, but really, you're the I am in this moment, creating with where you put your attention.
Mm, I love that. Yeah. So to have that realization, I mean, did- what was, I guess the experience in the Amazon is what brought
Mm,
you to this experience. Like before
yeah.
that, prior to that, did you have any type of awareness surrounding that I am presence? Like, or was this like fully blown off, like, um, experience, like just destroyed your paradigm, your former belief systems? And I mean, did you have a support system in place during that experience to support those ideas or concepts?
Yeah, I mean, for anyone who's used plant medicines before, especially ayahuasca, which I know has gotten very popular lately, which I would just say, do it if you're called. If you just try to do spiritual tourism oh, everyone's doing it, that sounds cool, you're not going to receive that much from it. But if your soul is calling you to do it with any plant medicine, that could be psilocybin, that could be ayahuasca, that could be, Wachuma, San Pedro, listen to that. But the ayahuasca for me, I mean, it took me through the death process a couple different times. Like really, I truly believed that those were my last moments on the planet in this lifetime. And the more that I resisted that in the experience, um, the more painful it was, the more suffering I was going through. And then the second I had this thought of, you know what, if this is how it ends, I trust that I can let go of this. And that's just what it was meant to be. And it was like right when that happened, just colors I had never perceived before, this feeling of oneness and wholeness and love that I had never conceived of before. And it really took me to this place of awareness and knowingness of like, oh, I'm a spiritual being having a finite journey, wearing this cloak that is named Sean. And I had this moment where I could look down on the body and see that suit that I was wearing. And I had a lot of love for him. I had a lot of love for the suit and gratitude to be able to do this. But it definitely took me out of that little me perception that I think a lot of us get locked into in the material world. And ever since then, it's been this kind of growing relationship of the soul aspect of me and the ego or the small self, the Sean. He's got all of his wounds and he's got all the things that happened to him, and then the soul is now kind of driving the car with him in the passenger seat instead of him driving the car. Like, holy shit, this is crazy. What I feel, because the ego is not really designed to drive the car in this life, or else there's usually a lot of pain and suffering involved with that. When the soul is driving, there's the knowingness, there's the conviction, there's the, you don't need to worry. Like you start to realize that there's a sense of well-being available to you most of the time. And so I feel
Mm.
like I'm starting to land there more and more, but that's the big shift, is that part of you taking the steering wheel from the traumatized, scared, small self version of you.
I love that, and I think people will hear that and they feel good about that, but could you give us, like, a practical example of that? Like, the soul driving instead of the small persona, right? Like, it's let's say you get a notice of or, like, some type of I don't know, like, you're getting ready to get fired from your job, or like you want to leave your job, right? Like, so how do you
Mhm.
allow the soul to drive like you did, right? Like, how do you allow the soul to drive that car? Is it like a surrendering of, like, all right, if I get fired, I get fired? But how would you, Sean, like, if you were faced with um unemployment or any type of hardship that a lot of people experience in this reality, how do you allow that soul to drive?
Yeah, well, I think that's one of those, because the what I'm seeing right now and what I saw in myself, it's like we're purging this survivalism from our consciousness collectively, and we're doing that individually. And the more individuals that take that on, it will add to the collective energy that we all share, the collective mind. And it's a big one. I'm not going to sit here for 1 second and say that's easy to purge that out, because that shit has been going on for thousands and thousands and thousands of years within us. And that's just evolution. Our awareness is down in the root chakra, and everything becomes about survival. And we're always looking around for threats. And now that we don't have these like external threats, they get projected onto things like our job and our steady paycheck and our bosses and those who are directing us during the day at these jobs. So to really, if you really want to pop out of that old paradigm of survivalism, there has to be the leap of faith moment or series of moments in your life. You can't avoid that in Earth School. That's part of the game, and it's scary as hell. because you don't know where you're going to land. You don't know what's going to happen. And that part of you that wants to control everything to feel safe, which goes back to the false persona that is built upon and has the job of trying to keep you safe, because it perceives itself as little me instead of all that is an expression of that. Um, to take that leap of faith into the unknown and not know what's going to happen is a requirement. And so as you're going through that process, uh, if I could go back and speak to myself when that was going on, when I left that job and all those things started to come up, it would be taking deep breaths, like having a practice of deep breaths daily, because obviously, as we know, that puts you back into a parasympathetic nervous system state where your body's like, oh, we're safe because we couldn't take deep breaths if there was something that was a threat. So deep breaths, and then this is the point where you start to encourage yourself. You start to become your own biggest supporter, and you that's where you start to build this beautiful relationship with yourself, where you realize you're soothing a scared child in you. It's not even you that's scared. It's this child who thinks he's going to die, right? And it's not even true. It's just, again, that survivalism in our genetic code that is feeling so intense. And that's part of the game for us to evolve beyond, so that we don't have that and then keep passing it down to our children. So what you're doing is incredible, and it's such a service to the planet and to humanity. You're helping to move things forward by taking this on. You're from that place. It's the only spot that you can get trust for you and life itself, right? So because only through that process you'll leap into the unknown. You'll grow wings along the way. You realize that you always had what you needed, and that life supports you because you are life itself, and it wants you to evolve. It's here to help you evolve. And
Mm,
so soothe yourself, like build this relationship with you, have conversations, look in the mirror, tell yourself, hey, it's going to be okay. We have everything we need. No matter what happens, we're going to be good.
sure. Yeah, I heard someone say this the other day. I think it was on an interview, Know Thyself podcast. One of the guests said, "If you live your dharma will protect you." Right?
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's taking that leap of faith, especially like if you are later in life, let's say middle age with children, right? Like you have a
Yeah,
lot more at stake here as
totally.
opposed to someone who, if this happened when I was like 25 and had this awakening and realization, like I think it would totally play out differently. But it's like there's a reason why, some of us have children and married and living in the suburbs and having these awakenings to help others, realize what it is that we're doing. And I think to your point earlier about, your father modeled that reality for you. It created those belief structures, which created your reality. I mean, I too, same thing, through mirroring not just my father, but society, and seeing like, collectively what is our priorities. It's, the 9 to 5 and building a house and living in a community and going to football and all of these things. And then you have this realization that there is something more, right? What created these beliefs? Like, is it my belief? And then, listening to like Dr. Joe Dispenza and some of his work, and other Bruce Lipton and a ton of other great leaders talk about like the programming and the neuroscience behind, like, just creating these structures in our brain to where we think it's reality, when you can totally change that reality. And being open to that, because your paradigm, it can crush you to
Yeah.
think about all the people in your life that have said a certain message, or a program, set a program in you, and then you have this realization of like, oh crap, like, are they wrong? Yeah, like, because that would mean your father's wrong, your mother's wrong, your church leaders are wrong, and these are all the people that you looked up to for support and guidance. And so if that's wrong, I mean, that could be earth shattering for some.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like we're, in a lot of ways, to me, we're learning how to die as we're living. And that's why I'm such a big fan of plant medicines, because they help me with that process of surrendering and letting go. And they showed me in the experiences what happens if you resist it. So what that means is like you so many different times throughout your life, you have to continually die to who you once were so that the new expression, the higher expression of you can come through. And that death process, especially at first when you're learning to do that, is brutal. It's like it feels like you're dying on the inside. And it's like, how much grace can you give yourself? Can you call upon from life? How much awareness can you have as that's showing up, where you know, like, okay, I'm in that season. I just pulled the death card in the tarot deck where everything's gonna fall apart and crumble. But know that on the other side of that, all these beautiful things are gonna come in that are a match to that higher expression that's being born out of that. Like one of my mentors used to say, from chaos, birth chaos is the birthplace of a miracle. So it's like anytime you see that around you, you can know, like, okay, the higher potential is trying to come in. There's about to be a miracle here. And that's exciting instead of it being this terrifying, super fearful thing.
Sure. Now, can I ask you a personal question? We had a conversation previously to having this episode, and you said that you were on the West Coast in LA, and you were working and living out of your car, and
Yeah.
there were moments of like intense, I guess, grief for you, just in that moment of not losing, but like spending all your money and not really having a place to live and living in your car, and there was a moment of like, just a breakdown emotionally, and you're having, crying and in this moment. How would you support that version of yourself? How would you, at the soul level, what would your soul come in and say to that version of yourself in that moment?
Mm, I love that. And as you say that, I'm like bringing myself back to that. Because I had a few of those where I'm in the car and I either have a negative bank balance or, $5 and have no idea where the next thing's going to come from. And that to me was like, at that point, a full death of like, because our life force is tied to money, and so that currency, when that's running low, it hits that for us. So I think if I can, in the quantum field, go back and hover above myself as he's going through that, I would just give him so much love and say, hey, I know your mind is going to have all these thoughts. It's shrouded by survivalistic thinking because you're in fight or flight, so you can't see the actual truth here. And this is going to give you access to everything that you've ever wanted. This is going to get you on your path that you were meant to be on. You had to go through this to get there, and it's going to be okay. Trust, 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 trust. I got you. You're okay. Everything's going to work out. You can't know. You take one step at a time, but I know a deeper part of you can feel that there's truth to this. So it'd probably be something like that.
That's beautiful. 100%. Yeah, I think that's, it's trusting the process. It's showing up and taking that next step day in and day out, but then again,
Yeah.
like knowing, like a huge realization for me was that the way that I create my day a lot of the time are the neural pathways that I have created already. So like my expectations, when I think about the past or future, there is anxiety with that because of my past experiences. I'm afraid that my future probability states will be like my past. And so like, how can you have this awareness or stop yourself from going down that rabbit hole of old thinking, and like take a step back and say, all right, you know, uh, that isn't my future. Like, it doesn't have to be that way. I'm just thinking the old way, the old version of myself in fear. And so, like,
Yeah.
have you created practices for yourself to have those moments of realization, or maybe like awareness, more awareness in the moment when you feel like you're being pulled to think in the old version of Sean? Like, how do you stay present in the moment to create new probabilities for the future?
Yeah. Well, I think as I because I've just devoured so many books and taken in so much content on the nature of reality, universal principles, the hermetic laws, and getting to a place of like, wow, these emotions that I'm feeling combined with the thoughts that I'm thinking, they pair up They go out into the field, and that draws things back to me. Where my attention is, that's like my own personal algorithm, and life brings to me, like on YouTube with the suggested videos. Where my attention is, like the suggested videos are the thoughts. Those are the experiences that are tied to what I keep putting in the search bar, which is my attention. So like really starting to understand these things, I was like, wow, if I don't take control and agency and live with intention to steer my attention where I want it to be, and to be able to create elevated emotions of gratitude, of joy, of peacefulness, of kindness, these things that people call the fruit of the spirit. If I'm not able to create that inside of myself, I'm kind of fucked, because then I'm at the whims of the outer world, which the conditioning is we let ourselves be dictated by what the outer world shows us, the material world, the symbols that are out there. You get a bill in the mail that was unexpected, and all of a sudden you're like, I'm not abundant, like I'm broke. What am I going to do? You go into victim mode. And if you can't see that from the lens of a creator, that's just a symbol. Because it's like, if you were a wealthy person, which so many people are trying to create wealth and abundance in their lives, prosperity, how would that person respond to an unexpected bill? It wouldn't even touch them. And so as I started to learn that, I was like, I got to stop screwing myself over by just letting my emotions be willy-nilly and thinking in the same ways, because I realized like that's the old story that I didn't know I was writing. And now that I know that I'm the creator of my experience, I have to intentionally be doing these things and grab a hold of that, or else I'm going to be a slave to the outside world the rest of my life. And so I've been doing a lot of practices around um, visualizing what my day is going to be, what I'm looking for, what I'm focused on. I take walks in the morning, and I listen to certain music that stirs emotions in me, that make me feel powerful, that make me feel joyful. And I invoke that part of me that's already there, that place that I want to get to. I recognize he's already here, and I'm just drawing him forth intentionally, and bringing that in, keeping that in my awareness as much as I can.
That's like a muscle. That's like, that's a workout
Totally.
in itself,
Yeah.
like just to break old paradigms and thought processes. Like they think it's so easy, it's just as easy as visualizing where you want to be, but it's like the emotion behind that,
Yeah.
and like continue to work on that visualization to where you can get like every detail in that
Yeah.
moment. But as you've created in that way, or that process, has it always been perfect, like the visualization that you've guided yourself through, like, or does it come in like, do you know you're there when you're there, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, I do get to a place of knowingness, and I love that you said that, because I remember I used to, you hear everybody talk about a gratitude journal. Everybody says that, and my ego mind is like, oh yeah, gratitude journal, cool. Like, all right, here we. So it was like a chore. I felt like I was doing a chore to check off some box on a list to try to make myself feel better. I didn't realize the utility of, like, you do the gratitude journal to generate the feeling of gratitude, to learn how to do that within yourself, to learn how to actually tune in to that frequency. Because if you're just writing shit and it's mechanical and the feeling's not there, it's an absolute waste of time. But if you know, okay, I'm here doing this gratitude practice to learn how to generate this, and intentionally, when I want to, when I choose to. And so it's not this thing that's like super hard to get to, which it might be at first. It was for me. We can actually, like, have the feeling of, like, you almost feel tears in your eyes that, wow, I'm alive, I'm breathing. I have people that love me. I'm following my path. I've had all these beautiful things in my life, like nature. Wow. We live in this sentient planet that loves us unconditionally. Holy shit. And getting into that place, where I realize that I can create that. That's the whole point. So it's like, you really do got to, and Joe Dispenza talks about it, you got to sit there until You get to that point, or else it's useless if you don't get
Sure.
there. You
Well,
know?
to your experience as a man in this reality, right? Like we cover our hearts up because we've been modeled that and we've been shown
Yep.
that we've been conditioned to do that. Now, your
Yes.
work and men's work is allowing men to break through that cover, that hardening of heart to really express who they are. Like, can you talk a little bit about the service that you provide the men?
Yeah. So a great example of that, we just had a men's retreat this past week, and we do a number of exercises to help crack us open, to help open the heart, get to that place of feeling. Because for a lot of guys, they're numb. They're super numb because they've learned how to do with that to cope. They've learned how to do that to cope with very difficult things that they've gone through in their lives. And I mean, there's probably so many men out there that their partner, their woman has said to them, "You're not emotionally available," and that hurts to hear that. And I think a lot of guys want more than anything to be emotionally available, but they're like, "How the fuck do I do that?" And so we did this exercise where there's a guy in the center, and he's naming the things that he's felt shame around, that he's struggled with, things that he's felt bad about himself for. And every time he shares that, a guy takes a step towards him, and then eventually somebody will get to him, and then he's got everyone's hands on him. And even from that place, a couple of these guys are like, I still can't feel. I can't get there. So I'll do a couple things, whether it's like I'm tapping on his heart and then I'm leading him in his imagination, like to that pain. Because I think a lot of guys can connect quickly that way through the pain. So it's like I'm naming all the things that he said, and then I'm like bringing him as deep as I can into that pain, the pain of not being emotionally available for your children, where they're going to have to, where they had to grow up with a father like that. And then they're just going to be that way to their kids. And how that was, how your dad was like that. Like how, because you haven't taken responsibility to handle this stuff, that's affected them. So like, I do agitate them a little bit to get them to that place of feeling. And then from there, it cracks open. And then all of a sudden, with questions, it's like, what would you say to that little boy who didn't have an emotionally available father? And now you're him. You're just another version of him. Like that, then the emotion comes out and the tears get released and they maybe scream, or that thing that's been pent up forever is now cracked open. And as for men that are witnessing this, that cracks them open too. And then we're in this field of energy, of heart coherence, where everyone's starting to sync up and everybody's feeling it. And when you have a bunch of guys together in that place doing that, it is so powerful because it gives you permission. If you feel safe to, it's to me, what I said this in this retreat was like, hey, our generation of men, not about the camaraderie on the battlefield, going to wars and getting it that way. We're all in this internal battle, and we're meant to do this together and support each other through it. And that's what builds the camaraderie, the connection, the brotherhood that I think most men are missing in their lives. The depth of conversation, the depth of feeling this stuff together, releasing these emotions, this bondage that we've been in for most of our lives. And I saw that with all of these guys. We went through that together, and it's just so powerful.
Sure. Yeah, I think there is a yearning for that brotherhood, right? Like I experienced it through some of it. I experienced some of it through sports. But a lot of us, let's face it, a lot of us aren't going to war, although there is a lot of war going on in this world. I think war is totally different than what it used to be. Like if,
Sure.
if you're going to war with your brother, like you're fighting hand to hand combat, like in a field somewhere, like it's totally different now. It's disconnected. It's almost like, obviously it's the technology is associated with that. But I mean, trust me, there are military friends that I have that speak to their brothers in war and just in the military that I wish I had that type of connection with just the men in my life. And I feel like the service that you're providing those men is creating a healthy relationship, with that connection of brotherhood, right? Like you're creating a container that is unconditional for them to be who they are.
Yeah.
And speaking to the collective, it's like we've passed down from generation to generation, genetically and energetically and consciously, these traumas of abandonment, like the wounded masculine. And so, like, our job now is to realize that and heal that, and go into these spaces of healing, and truly support your brother. And I find like a deeper connection with self, because like I've done one like 4-hour men's kind of seminar, and I couldn't believe the programs that I still had, that I thought, like, doing the podcast, I have a lot of conversations with great mystical teachers and channelers, mediums, and spiritual guides and teachers and leaders. And I thought I had done a lot of work. And then I went to this seminar, and I realized, like, there's still a lot of like underlying conditions and programs that are running like this version of myself. And being able to break that down and see it was truly eye-opening for me. It's almost like, I don't know, it's like you come out of it totally different. Like, I don't want to say upgrade, but your consciousness is definitely different than when you go in. And I think that's so beautiful in the work that you're doing, because it allows us to like really connect with our brothers and not see the external. It's like, you become aware of, like, my awareness is the same awareness that runs through you almost, right? That's the realization that I had.
Yeah. Well, it's like I saw so clearly this past week, because as you and I talked about the last time we connected, we had this one of our videos that was capturing these raw, kind of vulnerable moments from our last men's retreat. It went wildly viral and got millions of views. And I've never seen so much hatred and projection in my world of being in social media for the last 12 years or so. And what I could see this week with these guys, that projection of like, that's gay, that's for women, that doesn't work, blah, 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 you name it. All these different excuses or projections guys would throw out there. All that was their unconscious ego seeing something that would knock it off its high horse and allow truth to come in, a very inconvenient truth, which could lead to those death type moments. It's like, don't do that. Stay away from that. And then label these guys as something and pretend like they're not an aspect of you. And that's safe and that's comfortable. And it's just a fear response that's very unconscious. And so I'm watching these guys who moved through the resistance to get to this experience and come to the retreat. I saw what it did for them. And I saw these fathers, it transformed them, where they left with a desire to go home and be the absolute best man that they could for their wives, for their kids, for their communities. And so we did a lot of prayers together of like, for the guys who are in that fearful place of separation and projection, that are just trying to do the lone wolf bullshit. I'll figure this out. Oh, you just gotta, drink a beer, get over it, figure it out. Like, it's like, hey, hello, this person's dad that he learned this from.
Yeah.
And then you're just gonna give that shit to your kid. Like, so there's a big opening right now where I think guys are ready. I think men are ready to they're just getting curious of like, and it's coming from pain. They're like, I can't keep fucking living this way. I got to do something different. And a lot of guys just turn to suicide because it's gone so deep. They don't know what to do about it. And they refuse to, because the traditional help is like, oh, go talk to a therapist. Oh, like go to a
Yeah.
doctor and get medication. And it's like, that's not the way. That's not going to do it for you. You got to get together with other men who are in a similar place. You can see that you're not alone, and go there and talk about the pain, release that shame and guilt, and recognize that the you that is beyond all of those things and those false stories. And that will start to get the process moving of, spiritual awakening, enlightenment, like popping out of the small self-perception.
No, 100%. And we speak about this, and I think people should be getting like this realization of awareness. Like it isn't bad that our fathers were like this because they were just playing a model, they were playing a role, and they're just playing that role because of what they've witnessed and their experience up to that point allowed them to be who they are. And like I'm not hating on my father at all. I think, my father did excellent compared to what he endured, right? Or had you endure as a boy.
Yeah.
And he didn't have much to really pull from or mirror.
Yeah.
But still, we're all walking wounded men here. And our responsibility now is that we have this knowledge, we have these technologies, we have these communities that we're building to help deal with that trauma. It isn't like an overnight thing where, oh, I just went to a 3-day retreat and I'm cured. It's like a lifelong process. And I've really started getting into vision quests and reading about those, about how we can, detach from the matrix, go into these sacred spaces and heal what we're looking to heal, almost like a death and rebirth process. And when we rebirth, we go in back in, we have to go back into the matrix. How do you support the men, or like, how do you what tools do you give them to help them feel this good when they're in these sacred spaces?
Yeah. Well, I think what you're speaking to is the integration, because if you can, man, the dopamine buildup that you get, like you're out in nature, you're not in the normal day-to-day responsibilities, you're disconnected from the distractions, no technology. It's easy. It makes it way easier to access that part of you. And then all of a sudden you go back to the familiar reality, and it can hit you like a baseball bat. It's like, wow. And we talk about this at the end because it's, to me, the most important thing. It's like, hey, when you go home from this, your old reality is going to be staring at you. It is going to be tempting you from every direction to come back down, to be where you used to be, to go back to the familiar. And it's going to be one of the biggest challenges that you partake in this life, is getting out of those patterns and choosing something different. And that's where the practices come in that help you to anchor into that. And it's a neural pathway thing too. So it's like part of the work that we do at the retreats is we do a psilocybin journey, and that paired with the other things that we do, you're rewiring your neural pathways. You're giving yourself an opportunity, a window where it's not so grooved in. You've gotten off those familiar tracks a little bit. So you've created momentum. So it's like you can look at it as an internal fire. It's like, what do you got to do when you get home to keep that fire stoked, and prioritize that fire, because you don't want to let it go out, get sucked back into the old thing, and then have to come back out here and do it again and go through that same process continually, which is what some people do. And so it's like, you got to be starting your day off intentionally. You got to be doing some kind of breath work practice. You got to be doing some kind of meditation practice so that you can create space where you're not reacting in the old ways anymore. You got to have some kind of support system where you got some homies you can talk to, or you're working with a coach or a counselor or somebody that keeps that information at the forefront of your consciousness, that helps you to work through things as they're coming up. Without doing that, let's just be real. The matrix is powerful. It's strong. It's very tempting. It's got all the shininess and all the distractions. It's very good. And this paired with your ego, which, by the way, the matrix is like a outer projection of our ego, as I'm sure your listeners have heard before. Your ego just as much is very clever at feeding you thoughts, twisting your interpretations of things to get itself back in control when it senses that you're starting to leave the illusion.
Mm.
And so practices are so important for us to be doing. And if you're not doing it, you're just putting yourself at a real deficit. It's going to make it very hard for you if you're not doing
Oh,
that stuff.
100%, 100%. And a lot of us need to understand that, the practices are helping us get out of that fight or flight response,
Yep.
right? And back into that
Yep.
parasympathetic, state of being, to where we can really connect with who we are, if we stay in that
Yeah.
And the limbic system, it does what it does, and it releases a lot of neurotransmitters that keep us like in the present, in the persona, thinking that we are these bodies and these characters, and then we're basing our decisions off of fear a lot of the times, which just creates more suffer and anxiety, and
Yeah.
then it just eats us up internally. But I have a question for you about the Matrix, right? Like,
Mm.
is it the Matrix, like the model of society in which we live, or is the Matrix actually the world in which we live?
Mm.
And if that doesn't make sense, I can clear that up.
It's kinda well, it's kinda I don't know, I guess you could see it as like a Russian doll. It's like there's this matrix inside of us, which is like a series of belief systems and genetic information that we inherited um, that we're just playing out unknowingly, and these unresolved things from our ancestors that are tumbling down the line. Because to me, all of life is higher potential trying to unfold. And so, like, each person gets this opportunity with that genetic information. It's like, you think it's uniquely you, but it's really these unresolved things that are just playing out um, in a unique lifetime that you're having. But it's the same shit that your grandparents had, or their great grandparents, that they never dealt with. And now, for the first time in this way, we have the space. We've created, somewhat of the safety to learn these things and to be able to do this work, which wasn't really available before. And so it's like you start with, there's like a mix of the matrix inside of you, which is your ego to overcome and rewire, and then there's the matrix of society, which is trying to get everyone to conform and basically be a slave and be a cog in this system, that's designed to just use you as a battery. And then you could say the overlay. I just look at it as it's a game, like at the soul level, where oneness, you know it all, you don't have this human awareness going on whatsoever. So it's like it's a big play, and we're here to be in the joy of creating this elaborate matrix systems to then get out of it, to then overcome it like a puzzle. And
Mm,
to me, that's like a game that the
sure.
soul wants to play.
So the soul created this hard ass game for us to play in order in order for it to evolve and to really grow and to have an experience of like fully realizing itself. But then there's like, there's also aspects of itself that just is totally cool with just falling asleep and being asleep the entire time, right? But
Yeah.
it's like Plato's cave, right? Like there's so many different metaphors you can draw from that, like, or like ideas or concept that you can say it's about. You can say like leaving Plato's cave is actually the soul leaving this reality and going back to the higher reality, or you can use it as a smaller metaphor and say it is the human being leaving society and living, offline and like really seeing reality for what, seeing the smaller matrices in itself.
Yeah.
um, but like as you like to men's work, if you want to use it in that concept or context, it's like you're leaving the matrix, you're going out and you're finding the truth of who you are. Like it doesn't have to be as meta as oneness, but like even at the individual level of like seeing the programs that have programmed you to be who you are, working on that trauma and then inserting yourself back into the matrix. But once you do that, like even in Plato's cave, like the people that are still asleep, that are still chained up, they don't want to hear your shit. Like they don't want to hear the realizations that you've had. Like to your point about the post going viral, there's so much hurt and trauma out there. I mean, I know everyone's using the word trauma now, but it is what it is. There's so much wounded
Yeah.
masculinity out there that sees these things that we're doing and like, hates on it because they're like, oh, well, what would your grandfather do? Would he do these things? Would he lift a man up and hold him and be in a unconditional, just environment with this individual, this other man, and really listen to him and hold him and hug him and all of these different things? No, he wouldn't do that because his programs wouldn't allow him to do that. That's why it's our responsibility to freaking do these things to heal that generational trauma, those generational programs, in order for us to be something totally new. In order to be something new, you have to heal what you were in order to get there, and you have to think totally outside the box in order to, you know what I mean? What is it? The saying that the problem and the answer are on two different, frequencies. Like you can't have,
Mhm.
if you keep wanting to, if you want to have a different problem or answer, you have to be totally something new. You know what I mean? Like it's,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm going on a rant, but I think
No, I know what you're saying, man.
in
It's like,
order, go ahead.
yeah. Well, what that brought up for me was I was just thinking of the arc of this journey, right? If you call it the hero's journey, let's say, where you go through this awakening to the truth process. You start to see the world for the construct that it is in that matrix, the bubble that you kind of pop out of, and then you want to shout from the rooftops. You want to tell everybody, do you see what's happening? Oh my God, look at this. Like you start sending them videos, you start sending them podcasts, whatever. And you realize eventually that doesn't work. That actually pushes them further away. And and then you start to integrate, right? You start to, it becomes a lived experience. And then you kind of want to separate yourself from those types of people, let's say. Could be family, could be old friends. You want to separate yourself because you're not stabilized enough yet in that newer frequency that you're dancing in. And so to be around judgmental people or people who aren't in that resonance, it can kind of shake you up. You feel like you got to defend yourself. You feel like you're still seeing them as separate. And there's a little bit of spiritual ego where like you might think you're better than them. And that creeps in really funny ways. And then so eventually though, you get to a place where you avoid going into that cave, into that darkness again. You have a stronger foundation built, and then you get to the point of realizing like the oneness of things, and like, hey, that's me living a different journey. That's me before I had this experience of realizing what the fuck's going on. And I don't need to pull anyone out of it, but what I am going to do and what I'm drawn to do is to go back into that cave and let my light shine as bright as I can. And I'm not trying to force anyone to do anything. I'm just being me. And I'm
Mhm.
being me, and I'm walking through that cave so that those who have eyes to see that light or to hear things that I'm sharing, they will be drawn to me. And you'll start to notice like people maybe you went to high school with start reaching out, or like interesting synchronicities. Family members start asking you questions that you would never have expected because you're not forcing anything anymore. You're just being you. And when you're being you, you're magnetic, and you start to draw people to you, just like someone like Yeshua did, or some of these other ascended masters. They didn't go out and try to tell people what to do. They just went places, and then people showed up because they had that magnetism, and they weren't judgmental, and they recognized like they were no different than them.
Sure.
So that's the arc that I've really seen in this journey.
Sure. Yeah, man, I love that, speaking to Yeshua, which you resemble right now. I think,
The hair, yeah.
yeah, man, I was reading the Gospel of Thomas. I've been reading the Gospel of Thomas, and I mentioned it here quite a bit. It's like there was a saying in it, and I'm paraphrasing, you know, I guess you can say it like, why do you why have it, when you get to this certain point, people are going to ask you like, why are you renouncing the world? And it's not that you're renouncing the world that you live in is renouncing you, because it doesn't have anything that you're drawn to. Like the old version of Trey is totally different than the new version. Not that it's better, but it just, the things that I was interested in then, I totally don't resonate with now. It's just not that, again, it's not that it's better. It's just my pool and my direction that I want to go is totally different. And so it's not like I have to, like going to bars and drinking and partying and all those things, like socially drinking. Like I did that a lot. Like as a, even as a husband and as a father, like, weekends I'd have my buddies over and we'd drink beer and watch sports, and, that's all we talked about. But as I evolved, like my conversations became to have more quality. And I just wanted something different. Like I don't, I'll have a beer here or there, or a drink or something. But it isn't driving my decision base anymore. It isn't like I have to go do this, or I have to have a beer here with dinner to get through my freaking day, because now
Mm-hmm.
I'm dealing with it differently. You know what I mean? My days are, I'm setting strong intentions to be something more, and I'm having different experiences. And I find that if I can enter my day with a very clear conscious and with a strong intention, like things, to your point, like I can have more compassion for people. It's not that I'm better. It's not saying, oh, I have a better viewpoint. It's like, I have a different viewpoint of like individuals in my life and what they're going through, because I now know that they're reacting a certain way to my behaviors because of the programs that they have inside of them. So it draws like a deeper compassion for the individual. So I'm not taking things personally. Well, I still take things personally just because I'm a human being, but like I can see now that I can have more compassion for people when they're triggered by things that I say or do, because I know that deep down inside of them, that's their experience up to that point, and they might not have any clue to why they're reacting in that certain way, if that makes sense.
Totally, man. And we talked about that this weekend. I did this workshop on archetypes and how, we're sharing this one big universal mind. We're all existing within it. And there's the hundreds, if not thousands, or infinite amounts of archetypes or psychic patterns, as Carl Jung would say, units of the one mind. And what I was teaching the guys was like, hey, um, most people are just a series of these different archetypes that are expressing at different times. We're not unique in that we all share these, but for some more than others, certain ones express. And for a lot of us, we have the childhood archetypes of the what's called the childhood survival team, the prostitute that compromises their worth and they settle for things and they go against their values to try to stay safe and accepted and loved or whatever. The victim that plays a powerless role to get love or some kind of emotional need met. You have the wounded child who outsources its power when it's afraid and takes no responsibility over that. And then you have the saboteur, which I know we all love, or we all know is like we sabotage ourselves thinking like you're fighting yourself, you're your own worst enemy. And it's like, no, that's a psychic pattern that you developed as a kid to try to keep you safe from a truth that was very inconvenient to your ego and to that persona that you developed. And so it's like anytime you start to succeed, that thing will start to come online and be like, whoa, come on back now. Because if you succeed, there's more responsibility, more people will see you, the people will have higher expectations. And I know for people listening, like if you played sports as a young kid and you did well, there's like that expectation from your parents, grades too in school, to do well. And then if you didn't, it was like, you don't get love anymore. All of a sudden, like you're not getting that praise and that's horrible. So like, we got to do that. And so it's all these patterns and I don't even see what I can see people in these patterns now instead of thinking it's them. It's like, oh, they're in the victim archetype. Oh, they're in the shadow version of the king who's trying to rule over other people because he feels like they don't know how to do that. Or, um, they're sabotaging themselves because, they're afraid of going to the next level. Like, so I don't really see people in the same way. I just see these patterns and I'm like, who are you beyond those patterns? And that's a different context of living life. And the guy, I think that made things click for a lot of these guys where they're like, holy shit, these are patterns we all have. And it's like, how do we engage with them? How can we see them when they show up and then get beyond them and recognize what's happening in the moment as that archetype is activated, which gets activated through the fight or flight in the
Mm,
nervous system.
yeah,
So that was a big piece of the weekend. I think it really helped guys to see things differently.
100%. Man, Sean, I was definitely in the flow state with you during this entire conversation. I think it was amazing, very powerful. And how can men, like listening to this or watching this, or even women, right, like learn more about your work and find out more about you?
Yeah, man. Well, I just want to say thank you again for giving me the space to come on and to share my story and this stuff. And I think these conversations are so powerful, and there's permission in there for people that are watching, especially the men, because women they're way more, they're way faster to jump on board and be like, let's go, like let's dive in. Men are a little bit more hesitant for sure.
Hmm.
But I guess if you want to connect, yeah, you can. My Instagram page and my YouTube page would probably be the places to go. And my YouTube channel is Follow Your Path Live. And then my Instagram is Sean _Padrick, Padric. And then, yeah, the podcast too, Follow Your Path podcast, which I talk about all things following your unique path, your heart, your soul, the breadcrumbs that life has left you or given you to find what that blueprint is, and which really you follow through excitement and
Hmm.
through passion and through that good feeling inside of you of like, oh, that's me. That you resonate like that because it's you.
Do you think our paths are like pre-written, or do you think we're creating them in real life, or I should say, in live time?
Isn't that the big life question?
Mhm.
I man, I feel like they are pre there's like a at the soul level, it's like, hey, if you follow this path, this is gonna realize your highest potential. This is gonna give you the most fulfillment on this earth plane. I think there's an element of free choice where it's like, hey, you can create whatever you want. You can explore whatever you want on earth. But there's a certain path that's very specific to you that lights up your heart the most, that if you follow and you trust, you will get that highest sense of fulfillment while you're here. And to connect to that, it's like, go back to your childhood, go back to the essence when you just came from source and you didn't have the stories of the world and your parents pushed on top of you yet. You're just in that carefree place. Like, who were you? What things were you interested in? I know for me, I love to be out in nature, climb trees, look under rocks. I love to do skits, and I loved laughter, and I love to just be active and play sports and musical things. I loved music stuff. So like, these are the things, if you can go back to your childhood and reconnect the dots, it's like that was you before the world got imposed on you, before you took that deep breath in and let it go, and then, stepped into the matrix. You stepped into the illusion, which we all agree to do, and then find our way back out. But it's like connecting to that childlike essence, which, the last thing I'll say, that was a huge theme this week with these guys. There was 12 of us. The inner child theme was so prevalent, and it made me realize, I realized it before, but it just made it even more of a big point. We've got to, especially as men, heal our inner child, because that scared and wounded inner child is the reason that we're so unhappy, and that we're unfulfilled, and that we have a hardened shell over our heart, and that we're emotionally unavailable. And we've got to recognize that that child is always within us. And if we're just bogged down in work and just pushing through and getting by and just like go, 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 we're not playing, we're not asking him what he needs, we're not doing things that bring us that sense of joy when we were alive back then. Um, there's really no way to be fully happy. Like, that inner child has got to be on your shoulders, and you got to let him know he's safe, and that he can create what he wants, and that you're a yes to it. And that and as a parent, this is true. Like, you got to be that parent that you are to your little child, to your own inner child. And it's a pivotal thing for men, especially at this point in the game. Like, we've got to save that little child inside of us and have fun and create and connect back to that essence, because that's such a big part of who we are. I watched these guys pop the mask off, get to the other side, and they were so funny, and they're making jokes, and they're giggling, and they're playing little pranks, and like they're just getting back to that essence again, out of that like trauma and where they shut themselves off. Like, that wants to come out. It really does. So I wanted to hit that home as this last point here, because it was such a in your face thing during this retreat.
It's awesome, man. I love that. Sean, my brother, thank you for taking the time to just sit in this container and just speak from your heart. This has been such an amazing conversation.
Yeah, man, I was in the timeless place too. I love these. So thank you, bro, for what you do, and your channel's awesome, and these conversations are super impactful. So I'm psyched that life connected us, and stoked to see where it goes.